The Last of Us, Episode 9. So, the final episode follows Joel and Ellie as they make it to Salt Lake City, where the idea is to pass Ellie over to the Fireflies so they can try and make a cure. I saw this episode was going to be 43 minutes long before I watched it, and I was concerned because I thought that's not going to be long enough, and they're probably going to have to rush through this, and unfortunately, I think that was the case. This episode did feel a bit rushed, a bit sudden, a bit abrupt. But saying that, it was still a good episode. We spend the opening 5 or 10 minutes in this sequence involving Ellie's mother, the sequence of her giving birth and how she gets infected while she's giving birth, and then, cuts the umbilical cord, and I guess that's them trying to show a reasoning for why Ellie could be immune. Very special circumstances because of that. Ellie's mother is played by Ashley Johnson, who was the original voice actress for Ellie. So it was a cool little sequence to show how Ellie could potentially be immune, because the game never really covers why she would be immune in the first place. It was a clever sequence, and I think it helped with Marlene's story and kind of showed her role in all of this, especially when it comes to the ending, the impact of Marlene on this entire thing and how it affects her. After this flashback sequence, we get to the Joel and Ellie part, and we see the pinnacle of them bonding. They open up to one another. They have the scene with the giraffes, which is cool. I'm glad they included that. Credit to this episode for how accurate it was compared to the game in terms of the locations and the dialogue. It was literally spot on for how I remembered it from the game, and also, of course, they added some new things in terms of dialogue, but I felt like whatever they added just elevated it all. So it was a really good balance of original stuff and additional stuff. We also get a lot of the original soundtrack in this episode, which was nice. I feel like it just elevated it all and added emotion to it all, especially when it comes to the hospital sequence. This segment was pretty great. It definitely highlights what is wrong with Joel's decision here in this episode, but everything prior has shown why he would act out this way and react this way. As a player of the game, you root for a decision. You never hesitate to do what he does because of what it means to him, and it's exactly the same here. You see what he's doing, and you don't want him to stop. You want him to carry on, even though overall what he's doing from an outsider's perspective is wrong. But Ellie has given him purpose again, and his decision is selfish, but you root for him and you understand why he does it, and you just kind of want him and Ellie to be together, so you can't really be against the decision made. This segment in the hospital was brutal, and it was something I was very excited to see on screen, but I did want it to last a little longer because it felt a bit kind of easy for Joel when the way they showed it. He was just sort of cutting through the soldiers. There's way more of them than there are of him, and they're missing their shots, and he's just one tapping them, and it's not that I don't believe it could happen, but it was just quite quick. I think they could have definitely made it look a bit more challenging for him, because he kind of just gunned him down and then he was just at the surgeon's bit. But I gotta say, Joel really did thrive in this episode. For me, it was his episode. We've had a lot of episodes that have been Ellie's episodes, but this was Joel's episode, and I think it's Pedro Pascal's best performance in this show, maybe since the first episode. It's definitely up there. It was a really, really solid performance from him, and I think he's proved why he's so good as Joel, especially in this episode today. But like other episodes, this episode did again feel rushed, and I also felt like it was sorely lacking Infected. Obviously, I've said for prior episodes, it's it would have been nice to have Infected, but they didn't feel all that essential. But now it just feels like, especially the second half of the season, we've glazed over Infected so much that it almost doesn't feel like there are any in this world. Do you know what I mean? Because it just feels like so long since we really properly saw them. But before I talk about the season as a whole, I'll say this episode was very solid. I really was entertained by it all. But because of so much happening in this 43-minute runtime, and just because of how quickly the pacing was, the ending does feel abrupt, especially compared to the game. The game really allows things to be spaced out. Here, it just felt very compact together, and it just felt a little bit quick. But a really good episode. I think this show will definitely play out differently for people who haven't played the game and aren't familiar with the story, so maybe it's going to feel like it wasn't as abrupt and quick to them. I'm not sure. But just for myself, a little bit rushed. But overall, this is one of the better episodes of the season. I'd give today's episode a 9 out of 10. So the TV adaptation of The Last of Us has been a much better adaptation than I think anyone could have hoped for, especially with the track record of how video game adaptations go. It's been translated from the video game to the TV in an exciting way. They've taken things out that I do wish they had kept in at times, but for the most part, I feel like they've added things that have actually made the story better in some ways. The standout issue for me from this show is the infected. I feel like they have been lacking. I think in the early episodes you do get a good dose of it. You even get a few flashback sequences with like experts and scientists talking about the infection. So I was actually worried it was going to be too much of a heavy theme, the infected, but if anything it just kind of deteriorated away very quickly. Our characters go through this world and it honestly doesn't feel like it's been that overrun with infected. I know it's like 20 years down the line, but even so it just felt like there should have been a bit more, especially when I compare it to the game. There's so many segments like the university segment and even this segment in Salt Lake City where you go through segments where there are infected, but there was just like nothing in those particular points in the show. And I just feel like if you're going through like an abandoned city or the wilderness where there aren't really any people, you should be bumping into some infected. There should be some just wandering around. Maybe they don't have to necessarily engage with them, but it should be a case of like avoiding or running from them at times. I know they are not the center of this story. I said that, like, I said I don't want it to be the center of the story because the center of the story is the characters. And they definitely have more of a place in the game setting for sure, because it's more of a case of like fighting zombies. It's more fun for the game experience. But they are just a fun and entertaining inclusion. Whenever we got infected in any of the episodes, it was always so fun and thrilling to watch. But as the show went on, it felt like we just got less and less of them, and I just think it's a shame. I think the episodes needed to be a bit longer just so they could throw in some segments with infected, because they were really sort of just cast away in the second half of the season. Apart from the addition of Kathleen, I've enjoyed all the additions and alterations in this adaptation. It's allowed the show to be its own telling of the story, it's made it exciting and surprising even from my perspective, and it's had some really powerful and standout episodes. My favourite episodes probably include the first episode. I think that was a really fun introduction. I really enjoyed the Bill and Frank episode, as you know, and I think the Henry and Sam episode was also really strong. I think those episodes kind of highlighted, just the emotional side of things. And honestly, the show was really at its best when it had some additional characters in. I felt, it just felt a little bit more thrilling and exciting. As much as I love the stuff where it's just Joel and Ellie, when you throw more characters in and they're all going through stuff together, I think it just kind of felt a bit more impactful. I won't waffle too much because week to week I've kind of been expressing my thoughts on this show. What I would say is that I have enjoyed some elements of the TV show more than the game. I enjoyed how they fleshed certain things out a little bit more. But overall, the game still takes the cake because it is allowed to pace itself more and space itself out better. Obviously, that's not like a flaw of the TV show, but it's just a case of this story even works better as a game because it's more spaced out. Obviously, they added a lot here, but it just did feel a little bit rushed overall. I think improvements, I would say, for this show really go as simple as it either needed more episodes, like 12 episodes, or it needed these 9 episodes to be like an hour 15 long each. That way you can include some more stuff from the game, have some more sequences involving infected, and just space it out a bit more. But as a whole, I did really enjoy this show. I'm quite interested to watch this show, like episodes 1 to 9, just sort of, within like a couple day period, just to see how it flows when you're watching it in one like sitting rather than week to week. I just want to see how that connects and if it feels like it flows better. And I'm intrigued to see what they will end up doing in a second season because, as you know, I'm really not a fan of the story in the second game, but I'm hoping they can adapt it in a way that actually improves upon that second game and hopefully, that they can just do a better job with the sequel than the game did. Overall, I would give The Last of Us an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a very solid adaptation. I definitely plan to rewatch it. In terms of the rewatchability rating, I would watch this occasionally. But yeah, this is great fun, and thank you for joining me reviewing The Last of Us. It's been a real fun ride, and yeah, I look forward to reviewing season 2 whenever the fuck that comes out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.